All right, well, hate to say it, but we're back at this step again at 3 hours. Wiseco crank locked up on me. Gonna send it back. They're supposed to either rebuild it because the rod bearing went out on it. They're either gonna rebuild it or send me a new crank if it's defective. So back to this stage again. Next, to take this off, the best way to do it off if you don't have an air impact is to leave it in the frame. You should still have to have the holder tool, and you won't be fighting the motor trying to move around while you break it loose. The easiest way to do it is to pull up on the holder and hold it with the socket on tightening, and it kind of gets it to budge, and then you can snap it loose after that very easily. Next step in this process is you're going to want to break all the outer clutch cover bolts loose. You don't have to break the water pump loose, but if you blew your motor up and you bought it the bike used, I'd recommend going through and putting new seals in it. I just rebuilt this motor, so I know all the seals and the water pump are brand new, genuine Honda with the bearings. So yeah, just go through and break all those loose and pull off the clutch cover. All right, so we got the clutch cover off, the outer clutch cover. Whenever you're trying to get it off, make sure you pull out this bolt here on the water pump and this one here as well, because they connect through. And should come off pretty easily. And then next, take this spring out here, and don't forget where that goes. It's kind of a one-way orientation, and this just slides off. You gotta take all these bolts out, break this loose, and pull this out of here. All right, so to get the Kickstarter gear out of here, all you have to do is release the spring from here, and then it should slide right out. And right here is the idler gear, and it pulls right out. And right here is your shift mechanism. This is your shift mechanism. It sits on in here, and it goes through and it connects to your shifter on this side. You can pull that out, and then you got to break these 3 10 mils loose, and your the rest of your shift mechanism will come loose. And then to break this loose, this is the best way I found to do it without the tool, because I don't have the tool obviously. Now I would not recommend doing this with the new crank, because it could bend the rod, but this is an old crank and it's locked up. It's not going back in the bike, so it's completely okay to do it like this. You just need someone to hold the motor while you snap this loose, because this bolt has torque spec of like 60 something foot-pounds. And after that, all you gotta do is break all the 8 mils loose on this side, and then hook up your crankcase splitter to pull the cases apart, and then you're in the bottom end. All right, so we got the case splitter on there. I already split my cases. So basically what you want to do is you want to thread the rods into here and here and right there. If you do it anywhere else, it goes through the cases because the threads are on this side. So you want to do it right there. And basically all you do is leave your nut on there and tighten this down here. And it pushes down on the crank and pulls the case up. But when you do it, this side's going to start to come up, and you got to hit this side with a mallet to get it to come up. And yeah. Alright, so Wiseco's taking forever to get back with me on the new crank that they're supposed to send me. So I just went ahead and ordered an OEM crank. I didn't want to run a Wiseco crank again anyway after the experience I had. First thing you want to do is grab your weapon of choice, either the torch, or the heat gun. I've been alternating between each, probably go for about 5 to 10 minutes max. And then next thing you want to do is don't buy a Wiseco crank. That's the very next thing. And the third thing you want to do is you want to grab your old crank bearings. Make sure you don't throw them away, because that's going to be your weapon of choice to make sure that puppy's in there all the way. So you're going to take it and just go around and around like that. Next thing, take your old crank bearing, put it on top. Take your weapon of choice socket, whatever you want to use, on top, and hit it with a hammer. Now once you get your bearing seated down in there pretty good, you want to take your bearing again, set it back on top, and take this, put it on top, and hit it a couple more times. Not too hard, just to make sure it's fully seated. Now the next best thing you can do is get you a syringe, put your oil of choice that you use in your bottom end, and just go all around the bearing. Your crank seals in. Next thing you want to do is heat up the case again and drop the crank in. Make sure your crank is in the freezer. Hurry up after you heat the case, drop the crank in, And next thing, put all the transmission gears in your shift forks. So just drop the crank in. It might take a little shimmying to get it through there. Crank spins smoothly. And after your crank defrosts, take a little bit of oil and just go all around the crank. Make sure you get the rod bearing and just all over the crank, just to make sure nothing rusts or anything like that. And if you want to be extra cautious, just like me, you'll take an air compressor after all this defrost, blow all that out, then put the oil on it. So we just went through all the gears, made sure all the washers and spacers and everything was there. Everything's put back together correctly. You got a washer on this end, washer on this end, and a spacer. It's all in the book. Everything I've done so far is by the book. That's the main shaft. It's your counter shaft. Everything's here on both of them. I have just made sure before I put everything back together. Don't want anything to be wrong. Drop the crank in, all the new bearings. So just drop the transmission in. Still have to put the shift forks and the shift drum back in. That's shift 1. Yep. Making sure to lube everything up before we put it back together. So now we got everything in here. So see, you spin. Alright, so you spin the shift drum to the right just a little bit until that one moves up. Be able to hold these top gears. It's hard to show, but I'm able to hold them. You see they're not spinning. So it's so hard to show y'all, but trying to hold it, it won't spin. It spins all together. We got the shift forks in. Got the brand new crank. So next thing you want to do is you want to drop your transmission in and put your shift forks and your shift drum in. Then make sure it shifts freely and then lube everything up. Put your case on and install your crank puller and put the cases together. And just make sure everything's going even, because sometimes it'll pull this side down. And you have to give this side a tap with the mallet. So got all this in here. This is the hardest part. Well, once you figure it out, it's just snaps straight in. Loctited all these bolts. This just slides on top. Went through all the gears are there. So the outer clutch cover on. Don't have the main clutch cover on, it's right there. Waiting on a washer that goes in between this locking washer, and it sits right there. And then got the clutch plates over there soaking with oil. Then just got to put the stator assembly back in, and my Woodruff key, and the clutch on, which is honestly kind of crusty. I might buy a new one, but I'm gonna try and clean it up. See what I can do.